Hello Willow class, I'm going to be reading the next chapter from EVERNIGHT by Ross Mackenzie. This chapter is called Blood on the Table. It is the 32nd chapter. Read along if you would like. Mrs. Hester stood at the window of her tower and stared up at the Evernight. She was wrapped in furs and a roaring fire burned in the hearth, but she was still shivering. In the time of the gods, it was called Badok. She turned away from the window, back to the firelit room, and there he was, leaning on the wall, arms folded. Shadow Jack. What are you talking about? The Evernight. During the war, it was a living weapon. Lady Light defeated it and trapped it deep in the underworld, and it would have stayed there had your people not opened the door 1,000 years ago. Mrs. Hester cocked her head to one side. My people? Long after the war was over and the gods were gone, a large explanatory party of witches travelled to the dark side of the world, said Shadow Jack. They found the Baddock's prison and let it out, not realising what it was. It marked them with dark magic and made them its army. The first painted, breathed Mrs. Hester. She imagined them out there now, travelling with the night, coming towards King's Haven, an army of monsters. Her breathing was shallow and short. You have the spell, I presume. I can think of no other reason why you would be here. Not quite, said Shadow Jack. Mrs. Hester brushed past him. On the display shelves where she kept the ancient urn made of clay, upon which there were many faded symbols. The sight of it made him shiver. Mrs. Hester looked at Shadow Jack, and then she looked at the urn. She lifted it down, turning it in her hands. You know, the day I walked into that antique store in the south and saw this urn sitting among a pile of worthless junk, I couldn't believe my eyes. They didn't know what they had, of course. Didn't have a clue there was a genie inside. I wasn't even entirely sure myself. And a single silver coin was enough to seal the deal. She glared up from the urn. When I let you out, you promised to bring me the doomsday spell. Yet here we are, more than 10 years later. I'm still waiting. I know where the spell is, said Shadow Jack. Yes, in the sewers. You told me that. But why don't you have it yet? It's not in the sewers anymore. There has been a complication. A girl. A girl? Yes, it seems she has a necklace. It's troubling me. Mrs. Hester screwed up her face in puzzlement. You think she's in the coven? Maybe. I don't know. But there were only 13, said Hester. 13 protectors of the doomsday spell. And you've done away with all of them. Look. From his pocket, Shadow Jack brought out a handful of wooden lockets and placed them on a table. There are only 12, said Mrs. Hester. Right. The missing one was destroyed the night I killed Bella Fox, the Crippleback Street explosion. At least, that's what I assumed. Mrs. Hester considered this. Then she rushed across the room to a wall packed with shelves stocked with many bottles and jars. She reached for a large jar, took off the lid, and brought out the carcass of a rat. At a desk by the window, she dropped the rat down and slit along its belly with a small knife, letting its guts and innards spill out. The hot, coppery smell of blood filled the room. Mrs. Hester took her finger and mixed and moved the pile of remains on the desk, the heart and lungs and intestine, and when she seemed satisfied, she studied the mess. her eyes searching, narrowing and widening, and her lips moving silently as if she were reading some fantastic story. Suddenly she brought her fist down on the bloody desk and glared up at Shadow Jack with a murderous expression. "The third necklace was not destroyed." Shadow Jack growled and balled his fists tight. Mrs. Hester's fingers traced through the rat guts. Her expression flickered with rage. "The girl you speak of, the one who has the necklace now, she's Bella Fox's daughter. She was there in Crippleback Street. Then she would have only been a baby. She'd never have survived. Unless the hag hid her away, protected her. So you are saying Fox passed the necklace on to her child? And with it her duty, her link to the bird?" Mrs. Hester nodded. "Which means you've let me down. The coven has not been destroyed. While the girl lives, her soul is linked to the spell, and only she can use it. I can't control this thing we've released." "We've released? I think your job isn't to think. Your job is to do exactly what I say. You handed the coven a second chance when you let this child live all those years ago. And if she figures out who she is, what the spell is, all my plans will be for nothing. What if she tries to use the doomsday spell? At best, she won't use it right. At worst, she won't be able to handle all that power. It'll probably kill her. Then where will we be, eh? With no way to control the Evernight. There'll be no more hags, no more white witches, no more magic. The mother tree will die." Mrs. Hester's breath was growing shallow and fearful. "We'll be finished." Shadow Jack examined his fingernails. "Perhaps," he said, "you should not have decided to play with something so powerful. I tried to warn you." Mrs. Hester drew up close to him, her face twisting and twitching with panic and hatred and fury. "Find the girl. Kill her. Bring me the spell. Last chance. If you fail me this time, you go back in the urn, and I'll make sure nobody else ever finds you."